I will end you tonight. The words hit Claire Bennett harder than the cutting wind scraping across the Aurora Bridge. Kyle Rhodes shoved her chest with a force that jolted through her bones. Her spine slammed against the freezing metal rail, and her heels slid helplessly on the damp concrete. Behind her was nothing but open air, and the roar of waves crashing against the jagged rocks beneath the pitch-black void. "Kyle, stop!" Claire cried, her voice tight with panic. "You're hurting me." "That's the point," he growled, his breath thick with the harsh sting of whiskey. "You think you can walk away from me like that?" Cars rushed across the far side of the bridge, distant and uncaring. A pale street lamp cast a cold light across Kyle's face, deepening the slack fury in his eyes and the tension in his jaw. Claire pushed against him, her fingers stiff with wind and fear. "I told you, we're done. We can talk tomorrow. Let me go home." He slammed her into the railing again. Her body tilted backward, the world tipping with it. Her right heel lost contact with the ground, and the violent echo of water pounding stone rose from below. "Kyle!" she screamed. Something in him made him yank her back, but only so he could clamp his hands onto her shoulders and shove his face inches from hers. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. "You're mine. I saw your boxes, your little lists of rentals. You think you can move out of this city without me? If you leave with me, or you don't leave at all. Say it." Claire shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. "No." The slap landed like lightning. Her skull cracked against the metal rail. Pain erupted across her left cheek, blinding her in a burst of white. "Say it," he snarled. Her vision blurred, her back scraping against the cold metal. "Someone will see us," she whispered, her breath trembling. "Please, stop. We can talk." "Nobody cares," he snapped. "They'll just drive past. Who would stop for you?" He shook her so hard her teeth clattered. Her nails dug into his wrist, useless and desperate. Behind him, a car door slammed shut. Footsteps followed, steady and unhurried along the concrete. Claire heard them. Kyle did not. "Help!" she screamed, her throat raw. "Please, someone help me." The next slap whipped her face sideways, blood gathering at the corner of her mouth. "Shut up!" A strong arm hooked around Kyle's throat from behind and wrenched him violently away from her. The crushing weight vanished from Claire's shoulders. She staggered forward, grabbing the railing to keep herself from falling over the edge. Kyle thrashed, clawing at the arm locked around his neck. "What?" The man behind him was taller, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark coat, his frame solid as stone. He dragged Kyle back from the edge and slammed him into a concrete pillar. "You like putting your hands on women at the edge of a bridge?" the man said, his voice low and dangerous. "Get off me," Kyle choked. "You don't know what she did. This is between us." "Right," the man said calmly. "I don't care what she did." His fist drove into Kyle's stomach. Kyle folded with a broken groan. Claire shuddered. "Stop," she pleaded. "Please, no more." The man glanced at her. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. His were deep green, too clear for a night like this. His gaze flicked to the bruise forming on her cheek and the railing behind her. "You should step away from the edge," he said. "You're bleeding." Claire pushed herself back until solid ground steadied her shaking legs. Behind her, Kyle threw a weak punch at the man's head. The man caught his wrist, twisted, and slammed him face down onto the concrete, his knee pressing between Kyle's shoulder blades. One more punch to the jaw. Kyle went still. Silence dropped like a curtain. The wind whistled across the Seattle night. The stranger rose and faced Claire fully. He looked to be in his mid-30s, short brown hair, a shadow of dark stubble tracing a strong jawline, a black coat draped over broad shoulders. His eyes never left her. He stopped an arm's length away and extended his hand. "Can you stand?" Claire nodded, then realized she already was. Her body trembled as if caught in a fever. He did not move closer until she placed her hand in his. His hand was warm, steady, gentle. He guided her away from the railing, positioning himself between her and the drop behind them. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone would stop." He looked at Kyle. The man lay on his side, cheek pressed to the concrete, chest rising faintly. "Most people don't like trouble, but you do?" she asked. "I don't like watching men like him win," he replied. Claire looked at Kyle. He was alive, barely. She stammered. "Still breathing," the stranger said. "Unfortunately, Should call an ambulance, she murmured. He hit his head. Maybe, he said, but you're worried for him. His voice dipped low. After he dragged you to the edge and threatened to kill you? Claire bit her lip. He was drunk. He didn't mean it. He did, the man answered. Men don't pull someone to the edge of a bridge to talk. The cold wind lashed through her thin clothes. She shivered. Wordlessly, he shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She held it tight instinctively, feeling its weight and warmth. You don't have to. I do, he said. You're freezing. He studied her a moment. Does he have a key to your place? Claire thought of the spare key on Kyle's keyring, of the nights she woke to him entering her apartment at 3 a.m. Yes, she whispered. Then you're not going home tonight, the man said. Claire stared at him, her throat tight. Where would I go? With you? I don't even know your name. You have 2 choices, he said. 1, you stay here until he wakes up. 2, you get in my car and I take you somewhere he won't find you for a while. I'm not forcing you, Claire whispered. What if you're worse than him? His eyes met hers, steady as steel. If I wanted to hurt you, he said, I would have let him finish. The raw honesty left her breathless. Claire looked at Kyle one last time. His fingers twitched. He would wake soon. All right, she murmured. Just for tonight. Just tonight, the man echoed. He walked beside her toward a sleek black sedan parked across the bridge. He opened the rear door. Please. Claire stepped in, still wrapped in his coat. The leather seat was icy. He slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and the car eased away from the bridge. Seattle's lights streaked past her window. Claire caught her reflection. Pale skin, a swelling bruise, his oversized coat, hanging around her like a shelter. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere he can't find you, the man said, and somewhere the people he works for won't look yet. Claire turned toward him. The people he works for? Kyle doesn't just work night shifts, the man said. He moves packages for people who don't want to be seen. You know who he works for? I do, he replied. And who are you? She asked. He met her gaze through the rearview mirror. Jack Callahan, he said. The name stabbed through her like a cold echo. She had heard it in bookstores, on television, in whispered warnings. Don't cross Callahan's territory. She froze. You're a Mafia boss? Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. Claire clutched the coat tighter. But you stopped the car. I'm not the one who's supposed to, Jack said. But I saw him grab you 2 weeks ago outside the bookshop. He held your arm even as you tried to pull away. You looked terrified. I thought you'd leave him before things got worse. I was wrong. You saw that? She asked. Yes. And you just left? I had my own problems that night, Jack said. I thought you weren't my concern. That was a mistake. His admission hollowed the space around them. The car turned into the city center, towers of glass rising on both sides. Jack guided the sedan into the underground garage of an upscale building. Claire's heartbeat quickened. This is yours? One of them, Jack replied. He parked, stepped out, and opened her door. You can still change your mind. If you want to disappear alone, I'll call a car and hand you cash. I won't follow. Then he'll find me, she whispered. Most likely, Jack said, his tone offering no comfort, only truth. She stepped out of the car. Together, they walked into a private elevator. Jack swiped a card and pressed the top floor. Claire tightened her grip on the coat and looked at him. You're taking me to the penthouse? And locking the level below. Claire didn't argue. She had nothing left to lose. No one left to call. In the elevator, she heard nothing but the pounding of her own heart and the name looping in her mind. Jack Callahan, the man who pulled her from the brink, the man she now had no choice but to trust. Because tonight, no one else was coming. If Claire's breathless journey from the edge of the Aurora Bridge to Jack Callahan's cold, towering penthouse made your heart beat even half as fast as hers, please subscribe to our channel, tap like, and share this video so you never miss the next chapter filled with danger and fates intertwining. And tell me, from which city or country are you watching? Leave a comment below so I can see where this story has traveled and how deeply it has reached your heart. The elevator doors slid open, and Claire stepped into the vast penthouse, the soft lights spilling. Across polished wooden floors, and tall glass walls gazing out over the glittering Seattle harbor. The quiet was so deep she could hear the faint tap of the wind brushing against the windows. Her fingers clutched the edge of Jack's coat, the warmth of it the only thing keeping her from trembling apart. Jack said nothing as he crossed to the control panel on the wall and scanned through the security cameras. She stood frozen at the center of the room, her mind still a step behind everything that had happened, her lips dry, her thoughts spinning with images of Kyle, his distorted face twisted with fury. The strike that blurred her vision. Jack's voice finally broke the silence, low and steady. "You can shower if you want. Clean towels are in the bathroom to your left. Sleepwear in the first closet near the living room. You do not have to say anything until you are ready." Claire turned toward him, her throat closing. "I do not know what is happening anymore. I only meant to end things. And then, it all turned into a nightmare." Her fingers lifted to her bruised cheek as her breath stuttered, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Jack stepped a little closer but maintained distance. "Do you need water? Painkillers?" "I have both." Claire nodded faintly. Jack went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and placed it gently into her hands. She held it with both palms as though afraid she might drop it. The cool water soothed her throat, helped her breathe a little steadier. She glanced around, lost in the elegant yet strangely cold space. "You live here alone?" Jack nodded. "High enough and quiet enough that no one bothers me." Claire pulled the coat tighter around herself, avoiding his eyes. She was still trying to reconcile the man who had knocked Kyle unconscious with the man standing quietly before her now. Part of her still could not believe any of this was real. "Are you truly Mafia?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Jack did not look surprised. "I used to be. Now I am stepping away from that world, not quickly and not cleanly, but I am choosing a different path." Claire studied him, half doubtful, half drawn in. "Why?" He paused before answering. "Because that world never spares people like you. If I were still standing in the dark, I would not have been able to stop Kyle tonight." Claire gripped the glass tighter, her eyes meeting his. "Why help me? You do not know me. You could have walked away." Jack sat across from her, fingers laced together. "I saw him drag you into an alley 2 weeks ago. You pulled away. You were terrified. I kept walking because I thought it was none of my concern. I was wrong." Claire swallowed. "What are you going to do now? Keep me here until he wakes up? Until the police get involved? The police cannot help unless you press charges. He has money, people, ways to disappear. You could report him and he would vanish for a few days only to come back as if nothing happened." Claire closed her eyes. "I am exhausted. I do not know what I should do." Jack rose to his feet. "You need sleep. The room to the left. The door locks from inside. No one enters unless you open it. I will not go anywhere." Claire hesitated, then walked toward the hallway, still wrapped in his coat. She turned back near the doorway. "What will you do if he comes back?" Jack looked at her, his eyes hard as forged steel. "I will not let him touch you again." Claire said nothing. She stepped into the room, closed the door, and turned the lock. In the strange and silent space, she sank onto the bed, her fingers still tangled in the fabric of his coat, her heart pounded against her ribs. She had stood at the edge of death only hours earlier, and now she was trapped inside a life she did not understand. But in the darkness, one thought steadied her. Not the police, not friends, but the man whose gaze had not wavered once as he shielded her from the wind on the bridge, Jack Callahan, the man she did not know if she could trust, but who tonight was the only reason she was still alive. Jack sat alone in the living room, the warm golden light casting sharp angles across his cold features. Beside him, the tablet screen displayed the building's camera feeds, and, earlier, a quick search on Kyle Rhodes. He had not needed long. What he found confirmed every instinct he had ignored. Kyle was not merely an angry boyfriend. He had been arrested for violent behavior at 25, the record sealed afterward. His so-called logistics job was a cover. In reality, he had indirect ties to 2 companies that transported goods for groups Jack once knew all too well. One of those companies had once been part of Victor Lane's network. Jack's heartbeat slowed. The pieces began to lock together. Kyle had not met Claire by coincidence. She was a target. And tonight was not the first time he had intended to hurt her, only the first time he had let the mask slip. Jack exhaled and stood, walking toward Claire's door. He did not knock. He simply stood a few feet away, leaning against the wall in silence. After a few quiet minutes, the door opened. Claire stood there in borrowed sleepwear, hair loose, eyes red. She could not sleep. He knew she would not. She saw him and hesitated. He nodded toward the living room. When they sat again, he handed her a cup of hot tea. Claire wrapped her hands around it, trembling slightly. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "I need to ask you some things about Kyle." Claire frowned. "What is it?" Jack set the tablet on the table and turned the screen toward her. "This is him, right?" Claire stiffened at the image captured by the camera outside the bookstore. "Yes, that was last Thursday night. He waited for me after my shift. I told him not to." Jack's voice deepened. "What did he say he did for work?" "Logistics. Night shifts in the warehouse. Sometimes driving." She paused. "But now that I think about it, I never saw a contract or a paycheck. Are you suspecting something?" Jack did not answer immediately. He looked her straight in the eyes. "Kyle might be working for someone I used to stand against." Claire froze. "You mean he is connected to Mafia?" "Something close to it, but worse. Victor Lane. If Kyle works for him, you are not just an ex-girlfriend, you are prey." Claire set her tea down, her hands twisting together. I have nothing he would want. I sell books. I live simply. I have nothing to do with your world." Jack waited a moment, then asked quietly, "What did your father do for a living?" Claire blinked. "My father was an accountant for an investment firm, then retired early because of his health. He passed away 3 years ago." Jack nodded. "Cause? Heart attack." But something flickered through her expression, something like a shadow. Jack leaned forward. "Are you certain?" Claire pressed her lips tight. "Something happened the week he died. A week before, he told me something was wrong in the books, but he did not explain. I thought he was tired. Maybe, confused from medication. He was obsessed with doing things right, to the point of breaking himself." Jack leaned back, his mind working. "What was the name of the firm?" Claire took a moment. "Sable and Carter Investments." Jack closed his eyes. He knew that name. They had been investigated for money laundering, then slipped away due to lack of evidence. And if her father had worked there, he might have seen something he was not supposed to see. Claire stared at him as if the world around her were fracturing. "Kyle came to me because I am his daughter? Because of some information I do not even know I have?" "Possibly," Jack said. "Or someone sent him to find out whether your father left anything behind." Claire rose to her feet and began pacing. "I do not have anything. I do not remember him giving me anything. I threw out so many things after he died. I just wanted the pain to stop." Jack watched her. "Have you seen anyone suspicious near your home recently?" Claire nodded slowly. "Once. Last week. I thought he was a delivery driver at the wrong door, but he was not carrying anything. He just stood there watching and then walked away." Jack stood as well, his expression tightening. "I will increase security around the building. And Claire, if you kept anything that belonged to your father, notes, old paperwork, his laptop, even a forgotten drive, let me see it." Claire went still, then nodded. "I will look." Jack watched her, his eyes darkening to something deep and heavy, like a sealed chamber in hell opening. "I do not know what Kyle was planning, but I know the people he might be working with. And if I am right, last night was only the beginning." The next morning, a faint wash of daylight crept through the thick curtains, enough to show the night had finally surrendered. Claire sat at the dining table in borrowed sleepwear, a cup of cold coffee between her hands, her eyes distant. She had not slept. Memories of her father returned in tangled fragments, like an old box of papers never sorted. Jack placed a plate of eggs beside her without a word and sat across from her, studying every flicker of emotion on her face. After a long silence, Claire spoke, her voice raw. "I do not remember much about my father's job. He was private, did not talk about work. But I remember how proud he was when he joined Sable and Carter. That was the first time I saw him smile for weeks." Jack nodded, still watching her. Claire continued slowly. "When I was in college, he often worked late. Sometimes he brought files home. I once glanced at a spreadsheet he was studying, strange numbers, foreign transfers, coded account names. When I asked, he said it was complicated business, nothing I needed to worry about. But toward the end, he began to seem anxious." Jack leaned back, his gaze distant as if piecing together a blurred puzzle. Claire looked down at her cup, tapping its rim lightly. A week before he died, he told me something was wrong in the system. Someone was hiding money and he had found it. I thought he was just overthinking. She paused, her voice softening. That night, he stayed up very late. The next morning, I found him asleep in the chair, computer still open. He just smiled and told me to go to class. That was the last time I saw him awake. A few days later, he had the heart attack. My mother was not home. It was just the two of us. The ambulance did not arrive in time, Jack asked quietly. Did anyone come to the house around that time? Claire thought, then nodded. A man came to deliver documents. He wore a gray suit and dark glasses. When I asked who sent them, he said they were from the old firm. My father hid them immediately. After that, he started putting multiple passwords on his laptop. One time, he dropped a small USB drive between the sofa cushions. I picked it up to hand it back, and he grabbed my hand so hard it hurt. That was when I became afraid. Jack asked, "Do you still have that USB?" Claire shook her head. "I do not know. After he died, I cleaned the house and threw away so many things, but I kept a box of old papers, his notebooks, a few documents, and his laptop. I thought they were just keepsakes." Jack stood. "I need to see them." Claire looked up. "Right now? If possible, the sooner the better." She bit her lip. "My place is about 15 minutes from here, but if Kyle is still around, I will go with you," Jack said firmly. "And I have ways to check before we step inside." Claire nodded. "All right. I will get the keys." She walked toward the bedroom, her chest tight with dread. She had never imagined that her father's memory might hold the key to a danger circling her life. And in the eyes of the man across from her, she understood something clearly. Jack saw a threat she had not yet learned to fear. Claire returned to the bedroom to grab her keys and a coat, her heart sinking at the thought of going back to the old apartment where too many painful memories still lingered. When she opened the closet, she found the old ID&A canvas tote bag her father used to carry his books in. She slipped her keys, wallet, and phone inside before stepping back out into the living room. Jack stood near the door, inspecting a small handheld device that looked like a frequency scanner, and when he glanced at her, his eyes were steady and firm. "When we get there, stay behind me. Do not get out of the car unless I say so." Claire nodded, knowing that if it had not been for him last night, she might have fallen into the freezing water beneath that bridge. She tightened her grip on the tote strap as if anchoring herself. Jack opened the door, and they had barely stepped into the hallway when his phone vibrated. He checked the screen, his brows tightening. "It is Marcus." Claire stopped, waiting while he answered. Marcus spoke quickly, urgently enough that she could catch fragments of the conversation. Jack responded in a low, clipped tone. "I understand. Hold your position." He ended the call and turned to her. "We need to leave now. I think Kyle is not acting alone." She drew one sharp breath and nodded. They stepped into the elevator, and as the doors slid shut, faint metallic noises echoed from the floor below. Claire looked at Jack. He already had his hand resting near the side of his coat where she guessed a weapon was concealed. When the elevator opened into the private parking garage, Jack motioned for her to stay behind him. He scanned the entire space before opening the car door and guiding her into the back seat for safety. She had barely set down her tote when a notification chimed on her phone, a message from an unknown number. She frowned. It was from her former landlord. The message read, "Miss Claire, I need you to come down quickly. There are some old documents from your father in the management office, and I am about to close." She read it slowly, her brows knitting. Jack caught her expression through the rearview mirror. "What is it?" She handed him the phone. His eyes darkened. "Who is your former landlord?" "A middle-aged woman named Mrs. Grant. Very polite, always signs her full name, and she has never texted me in a rush like this." Jack took a deep breath. "Claire, turn the phone off. Do not reply. This message is wrong." But before she could press the button, a knock struck the window beside her. She flinched and turned. A man in a building uniform, wearing a cap, leaned down toward her through the tinted glass. She did not recognize him. Jack immediately placed a firm hand on her shoulder to keep her still, then lowered the window just a crack. "What is it?" The man bowed slightly. "Sorry to bother you." I was asked to deliver the locker key to Miss Claire Bennett. Someone from the management floor told me to bring it down this morning. Claire's eyes widened. Your locker key? She whispered. I do not have one. Jack's voice sharpened. Who asked you? The man hesitated. A blonde girl in the office. She said it had to be delivered immediately. A chill crawled up Claire's spine. He lifted his right hand, revealing a small key resting on his palm. But as Claire leaned toward the window for a clearer look, something made her blood turn to ice. His left hand, a bandage wrapped loosely around his wrist, shifted just enough to reveal the edge of a broken arrow tattoo. Before she could form words, the man yanked the door handle. Jack reacted instantly, but not fast enough. Another figure appeared from behind. The rear door flew open. A hand clamped around Claire's arm with brutal force, dragging her out so violently she fell backward. Jack's roar echoed through the garage. Claire. She was pulled across the concrete, her tote hitting the ground as she struggled to resist, but a cloth drenched with chemicals pressed over her face for half a second, and her vision smeared like wet ink. She gasped, tried to call Jack's name, but it came out as a faint, broken sound. Footsteps pounded around her, bodies grappling, voices cursing, and then a sharp blow struck the back of her head, swallowing the world in darkness. When Claire opened her eyes again, there was no soft penthouse light, no warm scent of wood, no sound of Jack calling her name. Only dampness, dripping water, and ropes biting into her wrists as they pinned her to a freezing metal chair. A warehouse stretched around her, shadowy and vast, wooden crates stacked high, and a figure standing just beyond the dim light. Kyle stepped out of the darkness, his eyes bloodshot, his twisted smile sending a deep cold through her veins. Welcome back, Claire. His voice was quiet but laced with venom. You are not running anymore. We are not finished. Claire fought to steady her breathing even as numbness crept up her arms from the tight restraints. Each small movement scraped the ropes deeper into her skin. The storage room was damp and metallic, the air heavy with rust and dust. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Kyle sat on a wooden crate opposite her, elbows on his knees, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand as though he were settling into a casual morning. Claire stared at him, refusing to look away. He was not the man who once gave her old books on their first date. There was nothing soft or human left in his eyes. What do you want? She asked, her voice raw. Kyle swirled the coffee slowly. What your father hid, and what Jack Callahan is keeping. Claire shook her head. I do not have anything. I do not know anything. You are after the wrong person. Kyle laughed quietly. The wrong person? Claire, did you think I dated you because you liked books? You are a lead, a name on a list. Her nails dug into her palms. What list? Your father managed accounts for Sable and Carter. Among them was an off-the-books account, never audited, where he stored leverage, client information, amounts, laundering routes, and names that could topple half the financial world. Claire closed her eyes. I do not know any of that. If I had it, I would have handed it over. Kyle rose, approaching her, with slow, heavy steps. He leaned in close. I think you do know, or at least you saw something. A drive, a note, anything he left behind. You do not seem to remember, so let me help. He stood upright and pulled out his phone, tapping a few times. The screen lit up with an old image. Claire sitting in her old living room, holding a small brown notebook, flipping through the pages. She froze. He had been watching her, hidden cameras. Kyle smiled. I went into your apartment a few times while you were at work. Fascinating, really. You talk to yourself when you miss him, and you keep his notebook like a charm. Claire shook her head, tears burning hot with fury. You are sick. He brushed a lock of her hair behind her ear with a tenderness so chilling she felt her stomach twist. You think Jack Callahan will save you again? He is a shadow now, and he is not the only one who wants what you are hiding. Before she could react, the metal door behind her groaned open. Light spilled in, footsteps, echoing in controlled, unhurried rhythm. A tall figure entered, wearing a pale gray trench coat, salt and pepper hair slicked back, sunglasses shielding eyes that needed no expression. Claire knew without introduction. Victor Lane. He did not need weapons or shouting. His presence alone compressed the air. Kyle straightened immediately, setting aside his coffee. Mr. Lane. Victor nodded, keeping his gaze fixed on Claire. You are the last person I wanted to trouble. But it seems your father left some unfinished debts. Claire trembled. I do not know what you are talking about. Victor stepped closer, his voice calm, even, and terrifying. Give me what Mr. Bennett kept, and this ends now. A flight out of Seattle, a new identity. And I will never speak your name again. Claire shook her head, her throat tightening. I do not know, I swear. Victor looked at Kyle. She is not lying. But if she does not remember... He rested a hand gently on her shoulder as though offering comfort. We will help her remember. I have time. I am not sure Jack Callahan has as much. He turned away, leaving behind a faint, sharp scent of cologne and an atmosphere of death. Kyle watched him leave, then turned back to Claire with a warped smile. You see, this is no longer about you and me. This is survival, and I will use whatever I must to get what you are hiding. Claire lifted her eyes to the ceiling, tears slipping down her face. Darkness was closing in, and this time she did not know if anyone was strong enough to step into it for her. Jack's phone rang just as he was reviewing the security footage from the underground garage. Claire was gone in mere seconds, and that fact alone was a wound he could not forgive himself for. He answered the call without hesitation, recognizing the unlisted number. A clear, calm, deadly voice greeted him. Hello, Jack. It has been a long time. Jack tightened his grip on the phone, his voice lowering. Victor. Victor gave a soft chuckle. I hear you left the game, but it seems you still have a taste for old collectibles. Claire Bennett, a simple girl, yet she brought you out of the shadows. Jack said nothing. The vein at his temple throbbed. Victor continued. The girl is with me, unharmed, for now, but her time is running thin. I need an exchange. Jack growled through his teeth. You know I do not do that anymore. Victor laughed. You never played, Jack. You orchestrated. But this time, the rules are mine. Jack stared at the dark Seattle skyline outside his window. Terms, Victor replied smoothly. I want all data linked to the off-the-books account her father managed. I know you have a copy, and I know Marcus decoded it. Bring everything. I give you the girl, Jack scoffed. And I am supposed to trust you? Victor paused. You trust no one. I expect nothing else. I just need you to have no alternative. If you refuse, I will return her to you in pieces. Maybe start with her right hand, the one her father used to sign transactions. Jack closed his eyes. His whole body braced against a storm. Let me hear her voice. Victor did not argue. Footsteps, shuffling, Kyle's irritated bark. Sit up straight, Claire. Someone wants to talk to you. A few seconds later, her voice came through. Thin, muffled, exhausted. Jack, is that you? His grip tightened. I'm here. Are you hurt? I do not know where I am. They keep asking about my father, the hard drive, things I cannot remember. Jack's voice cut firm. Absolute. You will not answer anything. I am coming for you. Do you trust me? A short silence, then a whisper. I trust you. Victor took the phone back. She is still intact, but not for long. We meet tomorrow night, 10 o'clock. I will send the location, alone. No police, no guards. You know the rules. If you bring anyone, I will know, and she will disappear as though she never existed. Jack ended the call without speaking. He stood in the dim apartment, the phone still clenched in his hand. In the soft gold light, his expression hardened into stone. A life for a life. Once again, he would have to step back into the world he had tried so carefully to leave. But not for power, not for money. For a woman whose terrified eyes in the rain on the Aurora Bridge had whispered two fragile words I trust as if they were the last thing keeping her alive. And Jack Callahan knew that if he lost her now, whatever piece of humanity he still had left would be lost with her. Jack sat in a small room buried deep within the secured sub-basement of an old building in South Seattle, a place that had once been his command center when he was still moving through the underworld. The screen before him displayed a map of the city, dotted with dozens of red markers, marking every strategic point, hidden routes, abandoned warehouses, emergency exits, choke points in traffic, each one carefully identified. Beneath the screen lay a replica of the stolen data, enclosed inside a small hard drive. It was not the original, but it was convincing enough to fool a man like Victor. Jack had spent the entire night with Marcus building that version, scrubbing every trace of its true origin, re-encrypting it layer by layer, using an archaic numerical cipher. Marcus sat across from him, dark circles smudged beneath his eyes from hours without sleep. "You think he will check it himself?" Marcus asked. Jack nodded. "A man like Victor never believes anything unless he opens it with his own hands. We only need to buy enough time." Jack's expression hardened. "And by the time he realizes the replica is fake, Claire must already be out. If even a single second goes off plan." He did not finish the sentence, but there was no need. Marcus understood that 1 second was enough to destroy everything. Jack stood and pulled on a worn black leather jacket, beneath which he wore flexible tactical fabric that hid 2 guns and 3 thin throwing knives. He knelt, retrieved a metal case from a drawer, and opened it to reveal a whisper-sized listening device, lines, and enough isolation to avoid attention. While driving toward the rendezvous, Jack kept the radio off, his mind focused only on Claire's faint but unwavering voice through the phone. "I trust you." Just 2 words, yet the only thing keeping him breathing. He parked 2 blocks away, switched to an older SUV he had hidden in the underground garage for more than 2 years, then walked the rest of the way. As he approached the factory complex, he scanned every rooftop, every flickering light bulb, every shattered window. Once again, the underworld pulled him back inside, and this time he carried no power, no political leverage, only the resolve to keep a woman alive. 50 meters from the meeting point, he stopped and tapped his phone, sending an encrypted signal. Marcus would receive it. 3 faint vibrations. It had begun. Jack moved forward, gripping the case with a calmness that belied the tension coiling through every muscle in his body. This was a game with no margin for error. 1 life exchanged for a fake drive, 1 misstep, and Claire would be gone. And Jack Callahan had never allowed himself to fail so completely. When he stepped past the rusted gate of the abandoned shipyard, the receiver in his right ear buzzed lightly, signaling Marcus had established connection. Marcus's voice came through, low and strained. "You are in a dead zone. I found 4 snipers positioned on the rooftop to your right, and a truck idling in the southwest corner, either the getaway vehicle or where they are holding Claire. He is far more prepared than we thought." Jack kept walking, eyes fixed ahead toward the single yellow bulb, casting a thin pool of light across the dusty concrete. "Understood," he murmured. Marcus continued. "I am within the safe perimeter. I can intervene within 6 minutes if you trigger an emergency alert. But Jack, you have to let me come in. 1 man is not enough. Victor is expecting you to slip. He does not leave openings." Jack tightened his grip on the case, his voice turning sharp as blade-edge steel. "If you step in now, she dies before you even line up a shot." Marcus's composure cracked for the first time in years. "This is not a mission, Jack. This is a real person. She could die, and if she dies, you will not come back from it." Jack paused in the middle of the yard, staring at the silhouette waiting beneath the light long coat, hands in pockets, the familiar stance of a man who had once been an ally and was now a viper. "Victor." Jack whispered. "You think I do not know that? I know exactly what is at stake, but I also know that if I die here, at least I die in the right place, for the right person. Claire should not pay for my past, for what her father uncovered, or for any mistake I ever made. She is the only reason I ever wanted to leave all of this behind, and I will not let her be dragged back into it because I am afraid to fail." Marcus exhaled sharply. "So what is your plan? You have nothing but the fake drive and 1 gun, hidden under your jacket. They have men, weapons, and a plane ready to take off if things go wrong. How do you expect to get her out?" Jack's lips curved in a bleak, almost tender smile. "I am going to make Victor believe he has already won. Then he will open his guard, and in that 1 second, I will take her and run. If I am not out in 15 minutes, follow the plan. Do not return for me. Do you hear me?" Silence hung for a long moment before Marcus whispered, "Do not die, Jack. I cannot stomach burying the last man I trust." Jack ended the connection without replying, inhaled deeply, tightened his grip on the case, and walked forward. Every step felt like treading the line between life and death. The ocean wind sliced through the gaps in the crumbling walls, carrying salt and cold with it. Ahead, Victor waited beneath the dim glow, 2 men in black standing behind him, hands resting on their guns. Claire was nowhere in sight, no cries, no footsteps, no chains. She was close, Jack knew, but just far enough that 1 mistake would erase her forever, and him as well. But what separated Jack from Victor was not whether he feared death. It was that he could not accept living if it meant abandoning the one person he wanted to protect. He took the last few steps, facing Victor head-on, his voice steady and resonant. "I came alone, exactly as you asked. Now hand her over." Victor's smile sharpened as he raised a hand to signal one of the guards, and the game began. Victor stepped forward, his shadow stretching long across the cold concrete floor, the eyes behind his dark lenses never leaving Jack's face. For a suspended moment, neither man spoke, as if the air itself thickened between them, until it carried nothing but the distant drip of water from a rusted pipe and the faint hum of engines somewhere near the docks. Jack held Victor's gaze like forged steel, his hand still closed firmly around the case. "You surprise me, Jack Callahan," Victor murmured, his tone almost amused. "I thought you would send someone in your place, or hide behind layers of security like you used to when you were on top. But no, you walked in here yourself, alone, with the one thing I want." He nodded slightly, a gesture resembling approval. Jack offered nothing in return, his expression carved into stillness. "I am here because of her, not because of you, not because of the old games I left behind a long time ago." Victor's lips curved. "Yes, your retirement, so the papers called it. Now your name survives only in tales whispered by the new blood, little legends traded in dark corners. But I remember how you brought down 3 syndicates in a single night, and how you buried the last leak that almost cost me everything. That is why I do not trust you." Jack lifted the case a little. "Trust has nothing to do with this. You have what you asked for. The remaining data from Sable and Carter's old server account codes, transfer routes, laundering schedules, the names that would keep you awake at night." Victor flicked 2 fingers, and one of his men stepped forward, slowly taking the case from Jack's hand. Jack's gaze never drifted from Victor. "I want to see her. Now." Victor waved a hand. A door behind him swung open. 2 more men emerged, escorting Claire between them, her head bowed, her hands bound, the left side of her face swollen and bruised. Jack's heart slammed against his ribs, but he remained utterly still. He only watched. Claire lifted her head, her eyes glazed with exhaustion and pain, but when she saw him, she blinked again and again as if needing confirmation that he was real. Jack gave a faint nod, a wordless signal that he still had control. Victor sneered. "She is alive, as promised. But that depends on whether you play fair." Jack raised his chin. "Check the data." Victor glanced at his man, who opened the case, inserted the drive into a reader, and watched as lines of encrypted code cascaded down a small screen. He nodded. "Looks real. Structure matches the fragments we saw before." Victor clicked his tongue. "Looks?" Jack cut in. "I am not stupid enough to bring you a fake. But I am not stupid enough to come unprepared if you intend to double-cross me." Victor laughed softly. "That is what I always liked about you. Still blunt, still cold, always with a knife hidden somewhere. But if you try anything tonight, remember I have an entire fleet waiting. The girl is nothing, but you have far more to lose than you admit." Jack stared directly into his face. "I am not here to bargain or threaten. I am here to end this. You have the data. I want her. End it here." Victor crossed his arms, considered for a moment, then nodded. "Release her." The 2 men holding Claire began to loosen the restraints, but at that exact moment, a sharp alarm blared from the device the other man was using. The screen went black. A line of error code appeared. Authentication failure. Victor spun around, a blade of fury flashing in his eyes. "You tampered with it?" Jack did not draw a weapon. His voice stayed even. "You have exactly what you asked for, just not in the way you expected." Victor and his guard pulled their guns, but before the roar of a shot could erupt, Jack pressed a tiny button hidden in his sleeve. A coded signal rippled through the building. Outside, Marcus and 2 intelligence officers stormed the grounds like thunder. Jack lunged sideways, dragging Claire down with him, shielding her with his body as the first bullets ripped through the air. The confrontation exploded into chaos, and this time, Jack was not fighting alone. Sirens wailed outside the warehouse as the first spray of bullets tore past Jack's head. High-powered flashlight beams sliced through dust and drifting gun smoke, revealing shadows darting between crates and steel beams. Heavy armored agents swarmed inside, shouting commands, their boots pounding across the concrete. A bullet whistled past Jack's ear and struck a metal pillar, behind him with a burst of sparks. He pulled Claire behind a rusted container, his eyes scanning for any path out. Claire gripped his hand tightly, trembling but silent, her eyes locked on his with a desperate, unwavering trust. Jack slid out a Glock, swapped magazines in a single fluid motion, then rose just enough to fire toward the far end of the warehouse. Shouts, gunfire, bodies dropping, glass shattering, an orchestra of violence echoing in every direction. Victor was retreating, signaling his men toward a side exit. One of them went down, shot in the shoulder, but clawed forward. Victor vanished into the dark with two others, unscathed. Jack's mind raced. Kyle had not shown himself. Claire whispered beside him, voice shaking. "I saw him. Kyle, he did not leave. He is above." Jack lifted his gaze to the steel rafters overhead. At that exact moment, a burst of muzzle flash flared from the highest scaffolding. A shot cracked. Claire screamed. The bullet slammed into concrete inches from their feet. Kyle. He was not firing wildly. He was hunting Jack, shot by deliberate shot. Jack shoved Claire flat against the container wall and rolled out, firing back. His shot forced Kyle to jerk away, revealing his position. Marcus shouted from across the warehouse. "Northwest rafters." Two agents sprinted toward the staircase. Kyle did not run. He rained bullets downward, striking an agent's leg and sending him crashing forward. Jack sprang from cover, low and fast, cutting across open space. Claire screamed his name, but he did not stop. He knew he alone could reach Kyle in time. As Kyle paused to reload, Jack leapt, sliding across dust-coated flooring, raising his gun and firing. The shot ripped through Kyle's gun hand. Blood splattered. Kyle howled and slammed into the railing. But even wounded, he tore a knife from his belt and lunged at Jack. They collided in a vicious tangle of limbs and metal, grunts and snarls echoing off the scaffolding. Jack drove his knee into Kyle's ribs, stunning him. But Kyle still swung the blade. It slashed across Jack's left arm, hot blood spilling. Jack did not retreat. He seized Kyle's wrist, pivoted, and with a brutal twist, slammed his head into the railing. Kyle crumpled, groaning. Jack stood over him, breathing hard, blood dripping from his arm. He leveled the gun at Kyle's forehead. Below, Claire stared up at him, eyes pleading. "Do not, please do not kill someone because of me." Jack locked eyes with Kyle, saw the terror and despair there, and slowly lowered the weapon. He kicked the knife away, then kicked Kyle again so he sprawled on his back, helpless. "Alive!" Jack shouted. "Take him!" Two agents swarmed in, binding Kyle. Jack staggered down the stairs. Claire ran to him, her hands trembling as they touched the blood soaking through his sleeve. He still managed a faint smile. "I promised. And you are still here." Outside, ambulance sirens wailed, red and blue lights flickering like the world itself, trembling. But in her arms, he felt only the breath of life, something he was willing to risk every piece of his dark past to protect. Claire tightened her grip on Jack's hand as they were guided out of the warehouse, the sharp light from the ambulances and police cruisers hitting her eyes so intensely she had to squint, the smell of blood mixed with gunpowder still hanging thick in the air, while her mind replayed the image of Jack throwing himself into a storm of bullets just to shield her. Paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher, tending to the scrapes and cleaning the cuts while she could barely hear the questions of a female officer hovering nearby because her gaze never drifted from Jack, who was being held near a patrol car by two uniformed officers. He did not resist. He did not argue. He simply stood there with blood running from the gash on his arm, his face eerily calm. Claire tried to push herself off the stretcher, but a nurse held her down, prompting her to cry out that he had done nothing wrong, that he had saved her. Yet the police still refused to release him, and one officer stepped forward to read him his Miranda rights before snapping the cuffs around his wrists. Jack turned toward Claire, his eyes softening in a way that silently promised her everything would be handled. Another officer explained that Jack Callahan was currently listed as a person of interest in the assault at the shipyard, a site now confirmed to be tied to cross-border criminal activity, and though he was the one who triggered the alert and was more likely a witness than a suspect, protocol required they detain him. Marcus rushed in, arguing fiercely with the incident commander, but the federal detainer had already been issued, signed at the national level. Claire cried, trying once more to rise but being held down as she shouted that Jack had saved her and that he was the one who brought the truth forward. yet in the chaos of sirens and flashing lights, her words dissolved into the night. Jack was guided gently into the back seat of the police car, not resisting, not speaking, his final look toward Claire, a quiet reassurance, telling her he had no regrets, that her safety mattered above everything else. When the vehicle pulled away, Claire folded into her hands as tears slipped down her face. Marcus approached and placed a hand on her shoulder, telling her they had to do it, that it was temporary, that he had already contacted the federal team and they would bring Jack out soon. Claire said nothing, only clutched her trembling fingers as the late-night Seattle sky churned with red and blue streaks of reflected light. She knew Jack had stepped out of the shadows to protect her, only to be swallowed now by a system he once belonged to. Yet she also knew that if anyone had the intelligence, the discipline, and the sheer will to break free again, it was Jack Callahan. The soft beeping of the heart monitor in the bright hospital room made Claire feel as if she had been dropped into a world too quiet for what her body and mind had endured. Her arm neatly bandaged, her cuts disinfected, her bruises pulsing dully when she moved, though the heaviest ache lived in her thoughts, which returned again and again to the warehouse, to the gunshots, to the scream in her throat, and to the image of Jack being taken away in handcuffs. The door opened gently, and a man in a black suit entered with a woman behind him carrying a badge that read FBI. Claire sat up, gripping the blanket. The man introduced himself as Agent Mitchell and the woman as Agent Saunders, explaining they were there to take her official statement regarding the events of the past 3 days. Claire nodded, asking nothing, resisting nothing, knowing the truth needed to be spoken not only to save Jack but to close the chapter her father had unknowingly left unfinished. She told them everything. Kyle's sudden reappearance after 2 years of silence, his strange behavior, the veiled threats, the confrontation on the Aurora Bridge. She spoke of Jack, how he saved her, how he quietly followed the threads leading toward Victor Lane's network. She told them of the hard drive her father once guarded, the notebook filled with cryptic codes, and how those items had ended up in her hands after his death. Agent Saunders wrote quickly, while Mitchell interrupted only to clarify details. When she reached the part about the decoy data, Claire made it clear that Jack's intent had not been to deceive the government but to buy time, that his only goal was to save her, and no one else could have done what he did. Mitchell paused, then asked if she had any physical proof that Jack was no longer tied to criminal organizations. Claire pressed her lips together, admitting she had no recordings or videos, but she had eyes, and no man would run into dozens of armed attackers carrying a fake drive that could get him killed unless he had truly changed. Agent Saunders finally looked up and said they were analyzing evidence found at the warehouse and on Victor's servers, and if Jack cooperated, his entire file would be reevaluated. Claire said he would cooperate, that he always did the right thing when given the chance. Mitchell stood, thanking her and promising her account would be written into a special report. After they left, Claire stared out into the gray Seattle sky, where buildings dissolved into fog, yet somewhere in her chest something small and bright flickered, not blind hope but something sturdier, because the FBI was now involved, and the truth was rising to the surface, pulling Jack Callahan closer to the real freedom he had never once tasted. The interrogation room buried inside the Seattle Federal Building was kept colder than normal, perhaps as a psychological tactic. Though Jack had known worse chills during his years in the underworld, he sat straight, hands calm on the stainless steel table, the harsh fluorescent light sharpening the edges of his gaze. Across from him sat Agent Mitchell and a federal attorney, both maintaining neutral expressions, though neither could completely mask the curiosity and gravity in their eyes. Mitchell began evenly, explaining that they had reviewed Claire Bennett's testimony in which she stated Jack saved her, severed ties with his past, and cooperated in dismantling Victor Lane's network, but they needed more than words. Jack did not flinch. He reached into his jacket and placed a small black USB drive onto the table. "The real data," he said quietly. "Everything Victor wanted. Account lists, underground transactions, laundering trails, the politicians and businessmen involved, and the encrypted evidence Claire's father had hidden away for nearly 2 decades. Mitchell did not touch it immediately. Instead, he asked why Jack waited until now. Jack lifted his eyes with steady clarity, saying he needed to ensure Claire's safety first, that Victor was not simply a trafficker of influence but a monster who always knew how to strike at a man's weakest point, that if he had handed the data over earlier, Victor would never have kept his word and Claire would be dead. And Jack chose the only path that kept her alive. The federal attorney noted that withholding information in an active investigation violated federal law. Jack almost laughed, saying Claire would be dead if he had let the FBI handle it alone. And he was willing to face whatever consequences came with that choice. Mitchell signaled to another agent, who carried the USB to the digital forensics lab, leaving the three of them in silence. Jack continued, his voice softening. He said he left his old life not to be a hero but to be a human being again. But he could not do that while his past clung to him like a chain. He admitted he was not innocent, that he had once ordered disappearances and protected the undeserving, but today he could use what he knew to destroy a network that had bled the city for years. And if they still wanted to hold him afterward, he would accept it, but Claire deserved freedom. Mitchell studied him for a long moment before asking if he would testify before a grand jury if needed, and Jack answered without hesitation, yes. That night, Jack was escorted back to his holding cell to await the analysis results. When the steel door shut behind him, he felt no fear and no regret, because he had lived his life in shadow and now found himself guiding light into the very corners he once patrolled. He did not know whether true freedom awaited him, but he knew one thing with certainty. Claire's freedom had been secured by the very secrets he once used to shield the old network, and now those secrets were being used to dismantle it. For the first time in his life, Jack Callahan felt his past functioning not as a weapon of destruction but as a shield of protection. The new town where Claire had been taken lay deep inside a quiet valley in Oregon, where red dirt roads wound through pine forests, and no one called her by the name Claire Bennett anymore. She carried new papers, a new identity, a past wrapped and tucked somewhere inside her mind, alongside memories she was unsure she wanted to remember or had chosen to forget. And her home was a small white wooden cabin near a stream, marked only by 2 rough wooden fences and a few pots of flowers to show that anyone lived there at all. The agent in charge of the witness protection program had explained every procedure, taught her how to respond in emergencies, handed her a secure phone and a thick notebook of rules she needed to memorize, but not a single page told her what to do with the hollow ache she woke up to every morning now that no one stood beside her. She met neighbors, mostly elderly folks and quiet families who kept to themselves, each person looking as though they too were hiding from something and no one asked many questions. Under her new name, Emily Harris, she found part-time work at the small bakery on the corner of town, learning to knead dough, brew coffee, and offer polite smiles to customers even when her heart felt unbearably heavy. During the first days, she counted every hour, hoping for a call, a message, any sign from Jack, but nothing came. She knew the witness protection program forbade all outside contact, especially with anyone still under investigation, and though her mind understood, her heart refused to accept that silence. After each shift, she walked across a small wooden bridge to a meadow by the stream, where no one ever came, where the only sounds were water moving over stones and wind whispering through branches. She would sit there for hours, arms wrapped around her legs, staring toward the distant blue hills while every breath carried faint echoes of Jack's low voice. The voice she heard the night he stepped into gunfire to protect her, the voice from the last look he gave her through the patrol car window. Those memories clung to her even as she changed her name, her home, her life, even her breathing. Sometimes she thought of running from the program, going back to Seattle, finding a way to reach Jack, but each time she remembered his promise that she must live, truly live, and to do that she had to move forward even when every day felt like a thin, silent wound. She began keeping a journal without dates or locations, writing only feelings. Some days nothing but a single sentence saying she was still alive. Other days pages of uneven lines filled with longing, helplessness, and the same question repeated again and again whether he was still alive. Though she never received an answer, she kept writing, the journal becoming the last fragile thread tying her to her old world and to the man who had risked everything to place her in this one. And deep inside, she knew that if Jack Callahan still existed somewhere in the world, he would find her. Not because of the program or obligation, but because of the silent promise they once exchanged through their eyes under the harsh warehouse lights. 3 months passed since she left Seattle, and life as Emily Harris settled into a slow, unchanging rhythm. Each morning she rose at the same hour, poured the same cup of strong black coffee, sat by the wooden window cracked open to the fog rolling down the distant hills, listening to the same stream and the same sparrows, while inside her nothing moved. Hope, fear, even sorrow fading into numb scars. Her work at the bakery no longer startled or challenged her. Her hands had learned the softness of dough, the timing of ovens, the preferences of regular customers. Yet beneath every polite greeting, she felt a shell slowly forming around her, separating her from everything outside. No one here knew she had once been Claire Bennett, a woman who survived a murder attempt, who loved a man born of shadows who had risked his life for her. No one knew how her heart clenched every night when she lay down with no news of him. The nightmares came less often, but when they did, they brought the image of Jack on a cold concrete floor, the look he gave her before the patrol car doors closed. Sometimes she sat for hours beside the unmarked phone, fingers resting on the emergency code the FBI had given her, staring at the dark screen without dialing, because she feared the voice that answered would tell her Jack had not survived the investigation, or worse, that he had been silenced by someone in Victor's network who still walked free. That fear kept her silent, held inside a loneliness created by the very protection she had never asked for. She attended church on Sundays, not quite for faith, but because for a brief hour she could sit among other people and hear someone else's voice. Though even her prayers felt empty, because she no longer knew what to ask for or whether anyone was listening. Sometimes she wondered if, should Jack ever return to her, she would even be the woman he once knew. 3 months under a new name, a new life, among people who knew nothing of her, had worn away pieces of who she used to be. Yet those same months taught her that regardless of new documents or buried memories, her heart spoke only one name, Jack Callahan. The man she did not know was alive or dead. The only person who ever convinced her that real love could exist in a world filled with deception and cold blood. The man who kept her waking every morning, though everything inside her felt long since broken. Rain fell lightly as Claire wiped the bakery counter, the soft tapping on the wooden awning sounding like her life these past months. Steady, quiet, almost too still. She had just hung the closed sign when a knock sounded. A tall man in a heavy coat stood holding a soaked knit cap, and she was about to gesture that she was closed when her gaze reached his face, and her breath caught Marcus, Jack's closest ally. The man who had driven them to safety, who had stepped in when everything was falling apart. She opened the door quickly, her chest tightening as if a storm had risen inside her. She stared at him, afraid he would vanish if she blinked. Marcus nodded, stepping in with the calm sadness of someone who had witnessed too much loss, and without offering comfort or embrace, he pulled from his coat a weathered yellow envelope, the edges creased and damp with rain, placing it on the counter and sliding it toward her, saying Jack had told him to give it to her only when he was sure she was safe. Claire did not touch it immediately. She looked at it as if it were priceless, yet fragile enough to crumble under her fingers. Marcus told her Jack was all right, that he had been held a few weeks after surrendering the data, but in the end, everything became clear. The FBI confirmed he had no remaining ties to any criminal organization for 4 years, and her testimony combined with the real data had changed everything. Claire laid her trembling hand on the envelope and asked where Jack was, and Marcus smiled a rare sight before saying he could not reveal it, that it was part of the agreement, and that Jack wanted her to choose what happened next. Claire nodded, tears filling her eyes as she opened the envelope. Inside was a simple page, no cologne, no fancy letterhead, only Jack's steady handwriting tilted slightly to the right. He wrote that if she was reading this, they had both survived, which was already a miracle, and that he had never believed he deserved a second chance or her. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her sitting by a window with morning light in her hair, and he understood that some things, once lost, could still be found if someone was brave enough. He wrote that he could not be near her for 3 months, not because he did not want to, but because he needed to ensure she was safe and that every dangerous door had finally closed. He wrote that he had signed a cooperation agreement with the government to earn true freedom, not by running but by facing everything he once was, and he did not know if she still remembered him or wanted him. But if someday she wished to find Jack Callahan not as the man who once saved her, but as a man who simply wanted to hold her hand through the rest of their days, she could leave a sign. He would not knock unless she invited him, would not seek her unless she called, but he would always be where she knew him to be. He ended the letter with the words that he loved her with all the pieces of himself that remained. Claire read the letter again and again, her tears blurring the ink as she pressed it against her chest as though she were holding him, and for the first time in countless long weeks, She felt her heart beat hard again, not from fear, but from hope waking after a long, cold sleep. Claire sat for hours by the window of the small wooden cabin, Jack's letter still lying on the table, as if it had become a part of her own breath. The rain had stopped long ago, yet her heart had not settled, and the words in that letter continued to echo somewhere inside her chest, each line scraping gently against a heartbeat that was learning how to return to life. She picked up the phone the witness protection program had given her, a device she had never used to call anyone except the emergency line, and for the first time since receiving it, she opened the messaging screen. There was no saved number, no name, no picture, only the single string of digits Marcus had left without explanation or pressure, only saying that if she truly wanted to reach out, she needed to write exactly 3 words. Claire placed her finger on the keypad, drew in a long breath, and typed slowly, "I am waiting." The message sent instantly, and the screen returned to its usual silence. With no reply and no sign, it had reached the man she hoped it would, yet she felt as though she had opened a door locked tight for months, and behind that door there was light. 3 days later, as sunset cast a soft red glow over the western mountains, Claire was watering her white chrysanthemums when she heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel. She did not turn immediately, afraid she had imagined it, but then footsteps approached slowly and halted behind her, making every cell in her body freeze. She turned, her heart pounding, and there stood Jack only a few steps away, still himself, still with those deep eyes and the tall, steady frame she once thought she would never lean against again. He was not wearing the dark coat she remembered, but a light gray shirt with the sleeves rolled, his skin sun-browned and his face tired, yet in his eyes there was an entire universe held still. Claire could not speak, only stared with tightly pressed lips, afraid that opening her mouth would unleash everything she had held back for months. Jack said nothing at first, stepping closer, one careful step at a time until there was only the distance of a shared breath between them, and after looking at her for a long moment he asked in a low, rough voice like a passing wind if she was all right. Claire shook her head as tears burst forth, saying she was not all right at all. He tightened his mouth, took one more step, and opened his arms. She fell into him, losing all restraint, her tears soaking his shoulder while he held her as though afraid she might vanish again. They stood that way for a very long time, saying nothing, letting only the wind rustling the trees and the warmth of their bodies speak. Claire clutched his shirt and whispered that she had believed she would never see him again, that she had thought he might, but he placed a gentle hand on her head, stroking her hair, whispering that he had thought the same, yet every day he had never stopped thinking of her, and that each signature he wrote, each question he answered, he told himself he had to survive because she was waiting. Claire lifted her gaze, her eyes swollen but shining like the evening light behind him, and asked if he still wanted to begin again with a woman holding a new name, in a town that knew nothing of them, and with wounds that had not yet healed. Jack smiled, the smile she had waited for through all those long months, saying that if it was her, then no matter how many times life asked him to begin again, he would. She embraced him once more, this time without tears, only heartbeats and shared breath, and they stood there as if time had stopped just long enough to let them exist fully in each other's presence. And in that moment, in a strange world they had reached through blood and broken histories, only one truth mattered: they had found each other again. Later they sat together on the wooden steps of the porch, as the last light of the day faded behind the distant ridge. The sky washed in soft amber like a painting brushed with the quietest memories. They stayed silent for a long time, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace they had fought so hard to reach, with Claire resting her head on Jack's shoulder, her fingers interlacing with his, and for the first time in many months, she felt that her heart was no longer hollow, not because life was suddenly kind, but because she was no longer alone. Jack squeezed her hand and admitted in a low, near whisper that he had once believed he could live his whole life in the shadows so long as no one was hurt because of him. But meeting her had made him realize no one truly lives by hiding in the past. Claire looked up, her eyes shimmering, saying she too once thought that escaping danger would bring her peace, but had learned there was no real peace without the person one loves beside them. Those words bridged 2 souls that had been fractured, distrustful, exhausted. She placed his hand over her heart and told him she loved him, loved even the parts he regretted, the things he had never spoken, loved the way he looked at her as though she were the only thing capable of saving what remained human inside him, and that she never wanted to lose him again. Jack lowered his lips to her forehead, his hand trembling, confessing that he had never believed someone could love him despite his past and his scars. But she had made him believe it not with words but with her courage, and the gaze she gave him at the moment everyone else had turned away, and he told her he loved her, Claire Bennett, or Emily Harris, or whatever name the world chose, because to him she was the first woman who made him think about tomorrow. She smiled through her tears and whispered for him to promise that no matter what happened, or what returned from the past, or how life changed, he would not let go of her again. Jack nodded, touching his forehead to hers, promising not because she needed it but because he knew he could not live without it, and said that from tomorrow they would begin again with no one running and no one pretending. Claire gripped his hand, her eyes full of trust, saying they would create a new chapter and a new life, not by forgetting what had happened but because they deserved a different ending, a more honest and beautiful one. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, as Claire leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, like the certainty within his vow. There were no gunshots, no shadows, only two people sitting together in a peace they had reclaimed with everything they had, and in that moment, without another word, they knew a new chapter had truly begun. Imperfect and uncertain, but real and worthy, because this time they walked it together. The next morning, sunlight poured through the rough wooden window frame, slipping into the small house and washing over Claire's slightly tousled hair as she lay curled beside Jack on the porch's long bench. He had risen earlier but did not wake her, choosing instead to sit quietly with one hand entwined with hers, his gaze drifting toward the misty mountains that looked impossibly calm, as though all the chaos and gunfire and old shadows had been nothing but a distant dream. Claire stirred and opened her eyes, her first glance landing on his face, and she smiled a soft smile that tightened his heart. They spoke little because everything that needed saying had been spoken the evening before. After a simple breakfast of bread and fried eggs, they walked to the nearby stream, the tall pines flanking the path, birds calling above, and the smell of earth after rain embracing each step. Claire paused beneath a large maple tree and touched its rough bark, saying she missed her father and the way he taught her to read maps, and told her real strength was the ability to protect others without losing oneself. Jack stood beside her, placing a quiet hand on her shoulder, saying he too missed a man who once taught him that silence could be the strongest answer to the world, though through the years he had used strength to instill fear rather than safety. Claire turned to him, telling him he was no longer that man, that he had chosen to save her instead of running, chosen to step back instead of seeking revenge, and that this said everything. Jack nodded, his voice low, revealing he had been given a chance to return after his record was cleared. The government offered him a strategic security advisor role, with power, money, and a path back to the life he once knew, but he refused. Claire looked deeply into his eyes and asked why, and he said he understood now that everything he once believed was power had only been emptiness dressed in shine, that what he had to build now was something more real, more lasting, a life where he did not wake with a gun beneath the pillow, a life where he could look at her and think about tomorrow instead of yesterday. Claire said nothing, only held his hand tighter. They continued along the stream, pausing to admire wildflowers pushing through stone, or to listen to the soft rush of water, and in each small detail of the world around them, they realized something simple yet profound, that peace had never been in the places they tried to seize, but in the place where they finally chose to let go. When the sun rose high, they returned to the wooden cabin, a place without power or subservience, or the echo of names spoken in the dark. Only two people with a heavy past and a present light enough to be shaped. For the first time, neither felt fear when thinking about the future, because no matter what might come, they knew they would no longer face it alone. Claire stood on the front porch as the early wind carried the cool scent of pine, brushing gently through her loose hair. Before her lay the small road leading toward town, glowing under the first light of morning, and beyond it stretched a wider world that once belonged to her childhood dreams. In her hand was a plane ticket and an offer letter for a job in a large city, a place she once imagined would define her future, yet she now understood that not every dream was worth the peace she had fought through so much loss to find. She turned back toward the simple wooden house, small, warm, and honest, where Jack was in the kitchen brewing coffee, his old rolled-sleeve shirt catching a beam of sunlight drifting through the window. He had not asked her whether she would leave or stay. He simply said he would respect whatever choice she made, but Claire knew her heart had already answered. She tore the ticket into small white pieces and released them into the waiting wind, watching them scatter lightly like fragments of a past she was finally willing to set free. Claire chose to stay, not out of fear or avoidance, but because she had come to understand that the true worth of a life was not found in glittering places, nor in titles or power, but in places where one could live truthfully, be loved, and be heard. A new life begins the moment we choose to stop, breathe deeply, and accept that peace is not a gift given by others but something we create ourselves with. Courage. The story of Claire and Jack was not merely a journey out of darkness, but a testament to choosing forgiveness, choosing to remain, choosing to love again no matter how painful the past had been. And above all, choosing to live for the present, rather than be drowned by what cannot be changed. And what about you? After hearing this story, how do you feel? Have you ever faced a decision that seemed small yet ended up changing your entire life? Have you ever found yourself standing between peace and ambition, between safety and the call of your past? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We would be honored to hear the honest, heartfelt stories that live within you. If you enjoy emotional narratives like this one, do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it so that these gentle, meaningful messages can reach more people. Each day, we strive to bring you content that is sincere, reflective, and deeply human. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We wish you good health, a peaceful life, and quiet joy in every ordinary moment. Goodbye, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.